Let the record show that the regular Riverview City Council meeting was called to order at 7 p.m. on March 18th, 2024. Will the clerk please take roll?
Councilmember Ganaga?
Here.
Councilmember O'Neill?
Here.
Councilmember Prey?
Here.
Councilmember Robbins?
Here.
Mayor Swift?
Here.
Councilmember Webb?
Here.
Councilmember Workman?
Here.
Tonight we have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman Robbins and the invocation by Councilman Prey. Will you please rise?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
O Heavenly Father, we are gathered here tonight to better serve you by serving our citizens, inspire in us a deep sense of public duty and a high code of ethics in order to achieve the best solutions for our community. We say this in thy name, amen.
Amen. Any announcements tonight, Jeff?
Yes, Your Honor, we do have a couple of announcements. First, Mr. Todd Dickman.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that participated in our Easter stroll this weekend. It was a great success. We probably had more than a little over 250 children show up with their families, and we had 26 businesses, churches, organizations, clubs, departments participate in the Easter stroll, which made it a great program for the kids. So I wanted to just say thank you to everyone that was a part of it. Thanks. And then also, we do have a comedy night coming up this Saturday at the community center. That's Saturday the 23rd. The doors open at 6:30. There are still few tickets available. If anyone would like to purchase a ticket for that event, they are $30. It is a meal included with 2 comedians and a cash bar, and the proceeds from it are going to help start a Riverview Rotary through the Southgate Rotary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, we have Mr. Jeff Kugelman filling in for Kevin Sisk at the Riverview Land Preserve.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just wanted to give an update. The Land Preserve will be reopening on Saturdays beginning April 6th. The hours are 7 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. for our contracted customers. And then for the general public, it'll be from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Saturdays, moving forward, starting with April 6th. And then recycling, that'll also be on Saturdays from 7 to 11:30 a.m. And everything has been updated on the city's website to reflect the new opening times.
Thank you, Jeff. Anything else?
That's it, Your Honor.
Excuse me. I do have a couple myself. I want to wish a special happy birthday to Catherine Mirand. She's only 100 years old. She'll be 100 towards the end of this month, so we'll wish her a happy birthday. And also, I met a really nice woman over the weekend. Her name's Blanche Williams, another a senior citizen. She's retired Ford Motor employee, so we had had that in common. She's really a wealth of knowledge, and she's 92 years old, so I want to say a special hello to her also. And also, congratulations to all the city employees that received the employee awards at the Riverview Hall of Fame. It was a sellout crowd. I didn't have the list of all the city employees, but I will get them soon. And I'd like to thank all of them for all they do for our city. So with that, for one, we have recognition of probationary firefighter Roshwana Rowland and her accomplishments in the completion of all the departmental training requirements and successful fulfillment of the probationary period. So I invite the chief and to come up.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. Special thanks to firefighter Rowland's family for being here with us this evening, and welcome to the city of Riverview. We're so proud to have your daughter, family member here with us here in the department now. She's been with us just slightly over a year and has completed her 1-year probationary period. Prior to coming to Riverview, she served 4 years as a paramedic in the private industry. She also worked 3 years with Detroit Receiving Hospital as an ER tech, and most recently graduated from Wayne County Community College with her state certification in firefighter 1 and 2. I can tell you a little bit about Roland that she brings a lot of joy to the department. And in the environment that we work in and some of the things that we do and see day in and day out, to have somebody like this that brings a little bit of sunshine to the situation is a blessing for us all. And we thank you for that.
Thank you, Chief.
With that being said, we have a certificate here that we would like to present Roland. Hold it for a second, please.
Got you, Chief.
It's in recognition for successful completion of all training requirements in a 1-year probationary period. She actually made her probation on the 6th of March, and we present this to you at this time. And I think your mother is going to do the honors with the badge. You don't want me to try to do that.
You'll need her services.
Yeah, please.
She's been waiting a while for this, so. Deputy, would you? Mom, you want to say anything?
Oh, yes. I'd like to tell my daughter that I am so proud of her. Congratulations, and keep on keeping on.
We'll move on. Approval of the minutes. Approve the minutes of the 3/4/24 regular Riverview City Council meeting and the 3/11/24 special meeting and the condensed version for publication. With council's pleasure.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Councilman Robbins, supported by Councilman Webb. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Neill?
Yes.
Councilmember Gray?
Yes.
Councilmember Robbins?
Yes.
Mayor Swift?
Yes.
Councilmember Webb?
Yes.
Councilmember Workman?
Yes.
Councilmember Ganaga?
Yes.
We have no public hearings today. Now is the time for a public comment. Anyone wishing to address the mayor and council, please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. Try to keep your comments to 5 minutes. There is no sharing of time and no rebuttals. And please be respectful. Yes, sir.
Ken Kyleman, 20243 Coachwood. Doing my best to keep my comments and questions to a minimum at these meetings, so tonight I have just 2 questions. I see that the council will be taking some action regarding the annual financial audit report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023, later in the evening. My first question is, when will that audit report, along with the city manager's annual report and accompanying financial report required by the charter, be made available to the public for their inspection? As of 5:30 today, I couldn't find it on the website, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And to avoid confusion, this financial report is separate and distinct from the quarterly data required as a part of the budget control that has come to be known as the quarterly financial reports. My second question is, seeing that the charter requires the city manager to submit his budget on or before the next regular meeting in 2 weeks, will that budget reflect the cuts necessary to operate our city without the millage increase that is being discussed, since that increase has not yet been approved? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Darren Sinsat, 17820 Brinson Street, Riverview, Michigan. I've got a couple questions that I put a outline on it. First of all, good evening, and I want to just ask the council, so many times people have come to the council with questions, and it never gets brought up again and never gets reviewed. And my question is why? That's a very important thing for us as citizens. Because I'm going to lead into the next question. Council, did you receive your quarterly financial report? Second one. Because you've been, for over 20 years, we didn't get any, and we got one. Have we gotten our second one? Mr. Mayor, have we gotten the second quarterly financial report?
Have we got the second, well, just real quick, have we got the second one yet?
Yeah.
No?
When?
January.
All right.
Well,
No,
okay,
it's January.
so we should be getting one right now, too, right?
End of March.
Okay, just want to make sure we're staying fluid with that because I'm leading into the next question. Is it true, we got a tax coming up that you're trying to raise the millage. Is it true that all the city employees got a 3% raise this year?
I don't know if they all did, but I know a majority of them have.
My company didn't give us a raise because of inflation. We had a lot of problems with it. And I'm wondering why, if you're going to ask us for taxes, why are you giving raises when we're in a bind for money? Doesn't make sense. That's not good management. I'm being bold, but I'm being straight. After the increase in property tax, I don't agree with the new millage. Because now the assessment on our property went up. Now you're asking us to give some more. You gave a raise now. I'm not saying people aren't deserving of it. But when you can't afford it, you can't afford it. And I have one more that's going on. Did the city, for the landfill, hire lobbyists to try to get the expansion? And if so, how much was that payment for a lobbyist that failed? Do we have an answer?
I can answer real quick. Yes, we did hire a lobbyist, and I don't know what the amount was.
Why not?
I don't have that
Why not,
paperwork
Mr.
in
Mayor?
front of me.
Why we don't know, and you're asking us for more money in taxes, and you don't know, you're not being transparent with us about how much you spent to hire lobbyists.
I don't want to lie to you. I don't have the number in front of me. I can get it to you and let you know soon.
We should know that off the top of our head. I got on the phone today and called Louisiana and talked to people down there about selling our landfill. There's plenty of people interested in it. We haven't been selling. Right now, there's independent companies wanting to buy landfills right now, a line of them. They want to do away with government owning landfills. That is the going position. That's what I got on the phone with today, that had a nice three-way conversation down there with people down there that were talking about it. So we don't know how much money was spent for someone who is representing us to get the expansion and they failed. That's a problem. When the director of the landfill, does the director of the landfill oversee the finances of the landfill?
That would be a guess.
So, Jeff, when you were director of the landfill, you were in charge of the financials, right?
Your Honor, I was in charge of the revenue and expenses of the landfill,
Right.
of the operation of the landfill.
The operation of it, but you weren't budgeting. What about budgeting and everything for that too?
Yep, I budgeted, Your Honor, I budgeted revenue and expense.
There seems to be some softness to that answer. So I ask again one more time. why we don't have an answer to that lobbyist that we spent money for to expand the landfill, and we paid to taxpayer dollars, and you did it, we don't have an answer to that. Can you give me a roundabout ballpark figure? Because I heard it was almost $1 million.
No, it wasn't $1 million for
I
a
didn't say it
lobbyist.
was
There's
big,
no way.
almost.
No way was it $1 million.
Okay, how much then?
If I give you a number and it's wrong, you're going to say I lied. So I'm not going to do it.
That's what got me
I'll get you the answer.
Your
That's what
Honor,
got me upset.
Your Honor,
We're
we
spending-
have
Okay,
all, Your Honor.
Jeff, it's time to wrap up.
Okay.
You wrap it up, Mr. Sensat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
In Your Honor, for the record, we have all of our costs accounted for and compiled, so.
Correct. But we will get that number. Yes,
Sally
ma'am.
Sullen, 14395 Hamilton Street. My only concern is, and I brought it up before, is, again, the millage. I have to go on record as saying I won't approve. I'm against it because, not that we don't support, of course, the police department, but I still feel that even though Jeff has done a wonderful job of reducing the cost from what we looked at originally, the I think it was the 4% or whatever, which I do appreciate, but I still think we need to dig a little deeper with some of the chances of that we feel that there might have been some misspending in the past, that we still need to look a little deeper for it and not approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? See none, we'll move on. Thank you. Is there any item that you, council wants removed from the consent agenda? And
Mr.
Jeff,
Mayor?
I believe we want, go ahead.
I'd like 9-1 removed.
Yes, that's, okay, thank you.
That
And-
would be my request, too.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. Actually, it probably should have been under some presentation, but we will remove it, and then is there any other item from the consent agenda council wants removed? Seeing none. We'll go 9-2, presentation of certified special assessment district tax roll by the clerk to the city council. 9-3, approve the offer from Henry Hoff to purchase 11811 Grant Avenue from the city and to direct the city attorney to prepare the necessary documents to effectuate the transfer of the title and authorize the mayor and the city clerk to execute the same. 9-4, authorize solicitation of bids for the spring 2024 gas collection and control systems well drilling construction project. 9-5, authorize execution of addendum extending agreement for the Civic Plus for code ordinances, zoning ordinances, and supplemental services. 9-6, authorize solicitation of bids for the sale of the city-owned cell tower and 9-acre vacant parcel on Grange Road. What's council's pleasure?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Councilwoman O'Neill, supported by Councilwoman Ganaga. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Prey?
Yes.
Councilmember Robbins?
Yes.
Mayor Swift?
Yes.
Councilmember Webb?
Yes.
Councilmember Workman?
Yes.
Councilmember Ganaga? Yes. Councilmember O'Neill?
Yes.
Okay, we'll go back to 9-1. I think we'll have a presentation, and then we'll ask for a motion after that. So invite Bill and Ramsey to come on down. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome.
Mayor, Council, good evening. So as mentioned, I'm Bill Bricky with Plant Moran, the audit partner on your account, and with me today is my associate Ramsey Abdallah, and we're here to talk about the audit for the year ended June 30, 2023. So hopefully what you've received in your packet, and we'll highlight some of these items tonight, are we have the financial statements, which is the large bound document. You have our report to Mayor and Council, and finally you have the graph presentation, which we'll go through in just a moment. Before we get started, want to take just a quick minute and thank Jeff and Ann and your entire team for their assistance throughout the audit. Obviously, there was a lot of turnover this year in finance, and so the audit was a little more challenging, but they did a great job getting ready and helping us through it. So we have covered all these documents in detail with the audit committee back in January, and our goal tonight is to provide you a high-level summary and answer any questions that you might have related to these documents. So the items I plan on covering tonight is first I'll cover our audit opinion, then I'll cover the report to Mayor and Council, and then finally I'll wrap up by going through the financial results here in the graph presentation. So the first item I mentioned is our audit opinion. So included in the audit report on page 1 is our opinion on your financial statements. So the city did receive an unmodified audit opinion, again in the current year, which essentially means the statements are in compliance with all the rules and regulations. I want to point out that our opinion does not speak to the financial condition of the city, but just rather states that these are the correct numbers. So I want to move on quickly and talk through our end of audit letter. So this is the 9-paged stapled letter that hopefully you have here. And again, I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but want to highlight a couple items here. So beginning on page 2 of this letter is our report to you on your internal controls. So we do have 2 audit findings in the current year to bring to your attention. The first would be the fact that throughout the audit process, we did assist the city in closing the books, meaning there were certain journal entries that we identified through audit procedures that were then posted by management for the statements to be in compliance with all the rules and regulations. This is something we commonly do, but to the extent we do that, we have to report to you that we indeed did assist in the closing process. And then the other finding relates to the reconciliation of bank accounts. So the expectation is that bank accounts are reconciled to your supporting ledgers within a reasonable period of time, typically 30 to 60 days. The reconciliations were behind several months in the current year, and although everything was reconciled by the time the audit was completed, many of those were not done in a timely manner. So those were the 2 items that were highlighted here on page 2, and those are our 2, what we'd refer to as audit findings to report in the current year. Moving on to page 3, this is a new section, and this is required communications from the auditor to you as your position of those charged with governance. So about halfway down the first page, we do have some issues here with non-compliance. So there were 2 non-compliances in the current year that were identified. The first relates to the state of Michigan's regulation over the land preserve and the requirement to have certain assurances in place there. And so in the current year, at June 30, the city did not have the required assurance letter of credit in place that was required. That letter of credit was attained in July of 28, so you were in compliance on July 28th, just not June 30. So we have the details of that non-compliance discussed here. And then the second non-compliance is the state does require you to issue your audit report within 6 months of the end of the year. And in the current year, it was issued on March 1st, so you were late there. So another issue where you're currently in compliance, but for the year, you were out of compliance there. The next item I want to highlight is on page 4. There's a section here called corrected and uncorrected misstatements. And these would relate to things we identified during the audit that were either fixed, which were those journal entries we talked about. And then sometimes we identify things that are not material, and so they're not corrected, but we have to let you know that there were some uncorrected misstatements. The primary one we identified is there was about $207,000 of revenue that was recognized in the general fund that did not meet the definition of availability under the accounting regulations. So under the accounting rules, that should have been recognized in 2024 versus 2023. This is something the city has often done, so it's kind of a recurring thing. But the rule is you have to receive any receivables within 60 days for it to be revenue, and this money was recognized outside that period. So again, that is documented here as an uncorrected misstatement. Moving all the way on to page 6, I want to highlight just a couple items here in this section with other recommendations. And the primary item I want to highlight here is related to interfund activities, so activities between various funds of the city. So in note 4 of the financial statements, there's a lot of detail on interfund borrowings between the water fund, the land preserve, the golf course, and the general fund. And so the details are in there, so we won't get into that, but just want to highlight the importance of continuing to monitor those loans. And there are current repayment schedules that were put in place in 2024, and just important to continue to make sure that those payments are budgeted, and you continue to monitor the cash flows that are available to make those payments going forward. So with that, we're going to jump into the numbers, kind of out of the letter there, and I'll go through this graph presentation again, which really just highlights some of the financial information that is detailed out in the financial statements themselves. So we're going to start off and talk about the city's general fund. And so we have a graph here that has a 5-year history of general fund revenues, and you can see the different bars depict the revenue sources. So we'll focus primarily on 2023 compared to 2022. So in the current year, overall revenue was just over $12 million, and that's up about $800,000 from where you were in 2022. As we look at the significant components of those, a couple things to highlight. You'll notice the yellow bar is the operating transfer that comes from the land preserve into the general fund, and you'll see that decreased about $1 million in the current year, from $1.2 million last year to $265,000 in the current year. Well, you'll also notice that charges for services, which is the green bar there, those did go up about $800,000 in the current year, and the primary driver for that was increased ambulance billings. So obviously you've done a lot in the fire department with going full-time fire, and you're seeing increases in the charges for services there related to the services they're providing. And then the other item that increased significantly was the federal and state sources line. So that's money that you receive either from the federal government or the state of Michigan. So the city did recognize about $600,000 of American Rescue Plan grant money in 2023, and that was used to subsidize some of the public safety wages that were spent in the current year. So again, on balance, I'd say your core revenue streams remained relatively consistent with the exception of your increases in grant revenue and those charges for services. So the next graph, we'll take a look at the same idea here. This is a 5-year comparison of the general fund expenditures. And as we look at the components, again, no significant changes in any particular category. You'll see the overall expenses were just over $12 million, and that's an increase of $794,000 over last year, about 7%. As we look at the components, the largest increase was in public safety. We saw about a $440,000 increase in that line item, and that was primarily due to increased headcount there. There were some open positions, and then just normal increases in fringe benefits and wages in that category. And then also you can see there that 53% of the city's general fund budget does go to public safety, so that continues to be a priority for the city. So we're going to look at those same expenses, just broken out a little bit differently, just to give you a visual on what are the types of expenses that are incurred by the general fund. And so you'll see that the primary expenses incurred are really related to your employees, so wages and benefits. So on balance, if you added up wages, fringes, retirement, and the retiree health care, which is the OPEB, that's about 70%. And then everything else that you spend is about 30% there. So again, just to highlight that, when you talk about the operations of the general fund, 70% of every dollar, or 70 cents of every dollar goes to pay for the employees' wages and benefits in the city. And that's very comparable with where you've been in the past, and many other cities are in that range as well. So looking at the next graph, this is just representing if we stack up the revenue and expenditures into a line graph. You can see the blue bar would be the revenue and the red bar would be the expenses. And so to the extent there's any gap in there, plus or minus, that would mean you're either adding to or using fund balance. And you can see the city has basically been operating at a break-even level for the last 5 years. And again, a lot of that has to do with the transfers from the land preserve that would come into the general fund. They would basically make up for any shortfall in revenue or expenses. And that's why this line is so well matched up with revenue and expenses. So moving on to fund balance, again, I just mentioned if there was any gaps in there, you'd be adding to or using fund balance. And you can see this line over the last 5 years is pretty straight. So this is the general fund balance, and at the end of 2023 was just over $1.6 million, which again has been relatively consistent over the last 5 years. So one thing we look at when we look at the health of a community is what is your fund balance as a percentage of your overall expenditures. And so the city's fund balance at the end of the year was about 13% of expenditures. So typically we'd like to see that in the 10 to 20% range. So you're pretty much right in the middle of where we'd like to see that. Another way to look at it is you have about 45 days of your expenditures in savings. So you could operate for 45 days if you didn't get any revenues if you decided to use your fund balance. So I want to spend just a minute and talk about, taxable value. So I think one of the biggest challenges with, the city of Riverview and really all communities throughout the state is, you wouldn't think so, but we're still struggling with the recession that happened back in 2008, 2009. Those property tax values that dropped, close to 15 years ago now are still recovering. And so when you look at the total taxable value of the city, you still haven't reached the level of where you were in 2009. So at the end of the year, you're still about $34 million short of where you were 15 years ago. And if I put some dollars on that, so if we're taxing at the taxable value in 2009 at your current millage, you'd have about $550,000 more of tax revenue that would be in the general fund budget. But again, because of the declines in taxable value, you've really lost that. Also playing into this situation is the Headley rollback factor. So the city does have a 20 mil charter, meaning the charter says you can levy 20 mils for operations. That millage, because of the Headley Amendment, which I won't explain in detail, but basically the Headley Amendment has rolled back your operating mills to just over 16.1 mils. So again, you're about 3.85 mils short of where your charter says you could be because of these rollbacks. And again, that's about $1.3 million of lost revenue because of the way the tax structure works in the state. So just like to show this because, again, I think everyone thinks the market's doing great, cities have recovered, but because of the way Proposal A works, your increases in taxable value are limited to the lesser of 5% or inflation, and that's why it's going to be a long climb back to where you were 15 years ago. So as we're talking property taxes, I always just like to highlight that although all the taxes for the community are collected here at City Hall, they are not all retained by the city. They are distributed to other taxing authorities, such as the counties, the schools, other authorities. So you can see the total millage for the city was just over 51.3 mils. Of that amount, 22 mils was retained by the city, so about 43% of the tax bill is retained by the city, and then the rest is given to the county and the schools and others. So again, sometimes we lose sight of that. People think they pay the bill here, you get to keep all the money, but that's not the case. So we're gonna look at three of the enterprise funds that the city has. So I want to highlight that. So we'll start off with talking land preserve. I do want to highlight that the accounting rules for enterprise funds, such as the land preserve, are different than they are for the general fund. So there's a little bit a different accounting method going on here. That's how the GASB says we have to do it, and that's why I'm going to try and do my best to explain some cash versus non-cash expenses. So when we look at this graph, the idea here is the black line is the revenue, and the numbers you'll see on top, that's the revenue, and then the bars are the stacked up expenses there. And the top two expenses, the yellow and the green, these are what I would say are non-cash expenses. So these relate to depreciation, these relate to changes in your pension and OPEB liabilities, and these also relate to changes in the landfill liability for future costs. So the way I think about it is these are true costs, but they're not cash outflows. And so that's why we kind of put those here. So when we look at the revenue, you'll see revenue in the land preserve was just over $11.6 million in the current year, and has been pretty consistent over the last few years. So since COVID, it's kind of dropped down a little bit and kind of leveled out. So again, at $11.6 million. And then when we look at the expenditures, you'll see there's been some declines in operating and maintenance and some other cost control measures over there. And to the extent that black dot there on the right side is above the orange and into the green there, that's essentially the land preserve generating cash flow. Because again, the green and the yellow are not cash outflows, they're just recognition of liabilities. And so in the current year, the land preserve did generate about $3.1 million of cash flow, meaning it brought in $3.1 million more than it paid out in operating expenses. This graph does not take into account capital. So to the extent capital is spent, that kind of eats up some of the cash flow. And honestly, in the land preserve, one of the biggest challenges has been keeping up with the demands of the capital that's happened there. So I took a look back, and over the last 5 years, the land preserve has spent over $24 million on capital. And that capital includes equipment, opening of new cells, maintaining, putting in required infrastructure there. So to me, the operations of the land preserve have not been the issue. It's really just been the capital spending and the requirements there to open new cells and things like that. So I think going forward, really managing the capital would be the key to restoring some of the reserves that have been used up in the land preserve. This next graph relates to the land preserve post-closure liability. So one of the things that happens when you operate a land preserve is the accounting rules require you to figure out how much is it going to cost you to close down that land preserve at some point and maintain it for up to 30 years, because there's ongoing maintenance and things that happen. So you hire an engineering firm to come up with this estimate for you of what do we think it's going to cost when this closes. What are we going to have to pay to do that, to close it and maintain it? And the estimate at June 30, 23 was about $64.2 million. That's the red bar there. The city does have some investments set aside for this purpose. So you have about $7.5 million set aside for that. And so you can see there's about a $47 million gap between what is it going to cost you to close and maintain versus what reserves do we currently have. So to me, I think this is one of the biggest challenges is trying to save up enough so that when you do have to close, which the current projections would say the land preserve has about 7 more years to go, that you have the resources available to pay for these costs. So we're going to shift away from land preserve for a minute and just take a brief look at golf operations. So this would include both the golf course and the golf practice. Again, similar to the last graph, we do have the black line, which is the revenue. On this one, the yellow would be the non-cash, and then the green and the orange would be cash-related expenses. So you can see there's been some significant growth in revenue in the golf fund over the last 5 years, and in the current year, revenue is just over $2.3 million as compared to just $1 million back in 2019. So really, we've seen a nice increase in revenue, but we've also seen some increases in expenses there. So in the current year, the golf course generated about $27,000 of cash flow, but again, it really didn't generate enough to cover all of its debt service and required capital outlay. So again, I think this is something where as you go forward, just continuing to monitor the revenue and the cash needs of this fund will be imperative to maintaining the health of the golf course. Then the final enterprise fund we'll talk about is the water and sewer fund. So water and sewer fund, again, you can see the revenue line relatively flat. There were some increases in the current year. Revenue did go up about $700,000 in 23 related to some rate increases that were implemented in the current year. And really, the water and sewer fund does continue to be in good financial health. I think, the biggest challenge here is continuing to monitor the capital. In the current year, you did spend just over $2.4 million in infrastructure in the water and sewer fund. And again, I think because all the capital that's done in these funds is so expensive, it's important to make sure you have a long-term capital plan in place so you can properly plan for the cash flows there. And then the final graph I'm going to talk through, we're going to shift away from all of this and just look at the legacy costs. So one of the toughest things for all governments is to manage the legacy costs. So these would be the pension and retiree health care obligations that you have to your employees. So on the left, you can see the pension plan. So the net position, the blue bar, this would be the funds that you have available, the investments that you have. So the city does have $32.3 million invested specifically for pension. And the estimated liability that's been calculated by the actuary is $37.3 million. So you're 87% funded, which is really good. Most communities are I'd say around 70% funded. So being at 87, is a good place to be. But then when we look at the retiree health care obligation, which by the way, this one was closed in 2013. So these are really legacy benefits for people who were hired before 2013 in the plan. You can see there you have about $900,000 of investments compared to the estimated liability of 21.7. So you're only 4% funded there, but this is a relatively newer standard where you're required to kind of measure it this way. And so the city has, continued to invest about $200,000 into funding this liability over the last several years. But it's going to take a while to get to, the funding level that you want to be at there. Again, this graph does not depict any of the premiums that were paid, so the city continues to make all the required premium payments for the retirees. This just looks at what have you set aside to advance fund a lot of those premiums that will become due. So with that, I guess I'll just conclude by saying I know I covered a lot of information there in a relatively quick fashion, but I think on balance, as you look through all of the financial information, I think, there are some challenging times with the land preserve and figuring out how to operate the general fund without transferring the money over, because again, I think, given the substantial closure and post-closure costs, the city needs to consider keeping money in the land preserve to fund that liability and then trying to have the general fund operate on its own without, getting subsidized by other funds. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions or get into more detail if there's something that didn't make sense.
Any questions for Mr. Bricky?
Your Honor, I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bill, would you state the opinion that we had with this audit? What the opinion letter said and what it means?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, on page 1 of the audit report, we do provide, the main thing that the main service we provide is to give you an opinion on your financial statements. And so the city did receive an unmodified audit opinion, which means the statements are in compliance with all the rules and regulations. So it means we're validating that the numbers in this report are fair and accurate.
Thank you.
I think I'll just make a comment. I think I know why you asked that, because there's been, and you've heard it already, Bill, a lot of discussion of that there's millions of dollars missing. So I would just ask if there was $1 million missing or misappropriated or moved, would that be something that would show up in your audit?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So if we had found anything that we felt was, fraudulent in nature or something that was done that doesn't follow the rules, that would be something that, one, we'd report to you in the audit letter, and two, we would be required to report that to the state of Michigan as well. And so we have not identified anything that would fall into that category.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilman Webb.
So when was it known or realized that approximately $7 million were removed from the water department to fund the golf course and the landfill?
So those, included, again, as I mentioned, in the financial statements, there is what we call an interfund footnote, it's note 4, and that's going to show any loans or borrowings between funds. And so, I don't know the exact date that happened. I think there's been some sort of borrowings for many, many years.
Your Honor.
Jeff.
And Bill, we did capitalize that into notes this year, so we did our part by officially recording them in the books and records of the city.
That's right. So so in the past, these have existed, they've been recorded, but there really hasn't been a stated repayment structure. I think now the step was taken to say, here's how we're going to repay them, and here's the timeline.
So we've got all that documented now? Awesome. Any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
And at that point, I would just look for and accept the annual financial audit report for the City of Riverview fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. What's council's pleasure?
So moved.
Motion by Councilwoman Ganaga, supported by
Support.
Councilwoman O'Neill.
Discussion, Your Honor.
Discussion.
I'm getting conflicting understanding or information about when the audit committee met. In the agenda says January 25th, but on the 9th page of this letter from Plant Moran, it's dated February 23rd. When did the audit committee meet? and discuss this document, this report.
I don't have that date here. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention, the date of February 23rd, that's our audit opinion date, so that's the date everything was finalized. We did meet in January, and typically when we meet at that, we're presenting drafts before they're finalized to give everybody the opportunity to look at everything before it's printed.
Okay, it sounds like the January 25th was pretty close to the date that the meeting was held. Is there any?
Yeah, actually, you're right, Brian. It was, I found it on my calendar, Thursday, January 25th at 3 p.m.
Okay.
So the audit meeting did happen.
Thank you. Was that an open meeting?
It was an open meeting. I believe it was advertised, too.
Does anybody know where it was advertised and when?
It was put on the city calendar. I did that myself.
On the bulletin board?
It was on the bulletin board as well as on the website's calendar.
Okay, interesting. Okay, and just from my understanding, am I correct that Mayor Swift and Councilman Workman are on that committee?
Yes.
Okay.
And we do believe we had, Chief Allen was there, and there were some other people there, and I think Mr. Common was also there.
Okay, so you did find it on the website?
Obviously, he didn't tell you about it.
No, I would have thought that
Nice
perhaps
going, Ken.
we would have saw it in an email or something, because I would have, had I known, would have liked to attend it myself, being new council member. You know, I think this is an important document for myself to understand, and knowing that it was received in January, and we received it 4 days ago on the 14th, it's a very short period of time for me to digest 80 pages, and I didn't even know that Plant Moran was going to be here to answer questions. Otherwise, I might have been a little more prepared. So the point being is that we have these committees and council members that attend, that for the council members that are not part of that committee, to share information with them. And again, I just want it to be said that I think 4 days is too short of a time for us to digest this document. So I'd like a little more consideration in the future, please.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Robbins?
Yes.
Mayor Swift?
Yes.
Councilmember Webb?
Yes.
Councilmember Workman?
Yes.
Councilmember Ganaga?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Neill?
Yes.
Councilmember Prey?
Yes.
Motion passes. 10-1, adopt resolution to call for a public hearing on April 22nd, 2024 for comments on proposed special assessment levy roll. That public hearing would be held on April 22nd. What's council's pleasure?
So moved.
Motion by Councilman O'Neill, supported by? Support. Councilman Robbins. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Swift?
Yes.
Councilmember Webb?
Yes.
Councilmember Workman?
Yes.
Councilmember Ganaga?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Neill?
Yes.
Councilmember Prey?
Yes.
Councilmember Robbins?
Yes.
We have nothing under administration, nothing under ordinances. Other business, anything council wants to bring up at this time? Then I'll do, I got some notes here from the public comment, actually from Mr. Kyleman. He said we did get the answer about the, this was from Mr. Sensat, the quarterly report. When will this be available? Is it the next quarterly report? Is that what you were asking about?
Nothing to do with the budget quarterly report, it's a different report. When the information.
I'm sorry, yes. When will this be made public? Now that we've adopted it, it'll be made public very soon. Okay, and then, will your budget, Jeff, include budget cuts if we don't get the 2 mills public assessment?
Your Honor, I do have basically what would be cut, but I really don't want to talk about that right now. I just want to, there will be a version A and version B, but I'm going with version A, that the 2 mills are inclusive in my budget. That's council's prerogative to review my budget and make changes if they so see fit, but if not, I'm pushing it through, preparing it in the way that the 2 mills will be on a separate line item in the budget, in the revenue section.
Thank you. And I also see Mr. Sensat left, but one of the questions he asked is why don't their questions get answered? I know we do our best to answer them under this part of the meeting, so we may not get all the answers, but we do the best we can on those. Did we hire a lobbyist? We already answered that. Yes, we did. I don't know what the exact number is, but when there was something as important as the landfill expansion, we hired some experts to help us. It didn't work out, but as always, you can always go back. If you try to do something, if it didn't work out, you get criticized because you spent a penny on doing it when the reward could have been great. I get it, so we will get that number. Also, he addressed the city employees' 3% raise. I think the rate of inflation is probably 5 or whatever it's been, 3%. And I think our employees, some of them haven't been raises for a while. And you want to keep, we've got some really, really good employees, and I think we have to do our best to keep them. So I think 3% is not unreasonable. Anything else council wants to bring up at this time? With that, I will, Councilman Robbins, I'm sorry.
The landfill would have been north of $300 million, correct? Is that what we were looking at?
Your Honor, to Councilman Robbins, $325 million is what, if we were successful, would have been the additional 12 to 15 years.
Okay, so we would not be here talking about 2 mills on the 22nd at all?
You are correct.
Yes, that's a good point. With that, I will look for a motion to recess into closed session for the purpose of discussing firefighters' collective bargaining. Recess means we're coming back, so there will likely some action taken when we come back. What's council's pleasure?
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Robbins, supported by Councilwoman Ganaga. Any discussion? Roll call.
Councilmember Webb?
Yes.
Councilmember Workman?
Yes.
Councilmember Ganaga?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Neill?
Yes.
Councilmember Prey?
Yes.
Councilmember Robbins?
Yes.
Mayor Swift?
Yes, let the record show we recessed at 7:53. Let the record show that we reconvened at 8:13 on, whatever the date is today? March 18th, 2024. Thank you very much. Will the clerk please take roll?
Councilmember Workman.
Here.
Councilmember Ganaga.
Here.
Councilmember O'Neill. Here. Councilmember Prey.
Here.
Councilmember Robbins.
Here.
Mayor Swift.
Here.
Councilmember Webb.
Here.
At this point, I would be looking for a motion to approve the tentative agreement ratified by the fire union on March 7th, 2024. What's council's pleasure?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Councilman Prey, supported by Councilman Robbins. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ganaga.
Yes.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Yes.
Councilmember Prey.
Yes.
Councilmember Robbins.
Yes.
Mayor Swift.
Yes.
Councilmember Webb.
Yes.
Councilmember Workman.
Yes.
Motion passes. At this time, I would look for a motion to adjourn from Councilman Workman.
So move, Your Honor.
Is there support? Somebody did it. Councilwoman O'Neill. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Sorry. Councilmember O'Neill.
Yes.
Councilmember Prey.
Yes.
Councilmember Robbins.
Yes.
Mayor Swift.
Yes.
Councilmember Webb.
Yes.
Councilmember Workman.
Yes.
Councilmember Ganaga.
Yes.
Let the record show we adjourned at 8:14. Thank you very much.